One piece of advice that I would give any entrepreneur that's aspiring to be an entrepreneur, it should be yourself and get yourself out there. That's probably two pieces of advice. Be yourself and go experience it. Go experience the world and get yourself out there. If someone wants to be an entrepreneur, they should have a spark of curiosity in their brain.
Happy to have you here today, my friend.
Of course, I'm thrilled to be here.
Try to figure out like multiple most interesting stuff that you worked with Bank of America for like a decade, half a decade.
Half a decade.
You've been in data engineering, you've been in business intel, you founded Delano Real Estate Ventures. Then you've been working with Bank of America also as a big business intelligence lead. You are an investor, you are an advisor. I know that you're working happily when it comes to tech startups. You're in a lot of entrepreneurial stuff. And what excites me more, you started your journey since you were 15 years old, right? Am I correct?
That's right.
But that's a lot to cover what I tried to do, but I would love to hear you to explain your journey, to tell me about your life, tell me how everything started back in how many, like 2 decades? How old are you right now?
I don't know. No, I'm joking. Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, right? And I don't think we have enough time for a few hours to tell my whole story. I'll give you the highlights. Right. Let me walk you through the highlights, right? So let's start from an early age, right? The one thing, I'm a 2-time cancer survivor, both at the age of 6 and 14. At the age of 6, I had stage 4 neuroblastoma, which is above the kidney. And, they gave me less than a 25% chance to live at 6 years old. Now, as a 6-year-old, I didn't understand that at all, by no means. All I knew was not good, not healthy. And at the age of 14, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. Not as harmful, of course, but I do miss my thyroid sometimes. They took the whole thing out. And then at the age of 14, I had a little bit more wisdom, right? At 14, you have another near-death experience. And imagine the amount of follow-ups with doctors since the age of 6 years old. Many times a year, you go get checkups. They want to know I'm okay. And they still do that, even at my age now, of course. Long-term survivorship. And so 14, when we had this second cancer, that's where something slipped in my mind where I can't just be a shithead, right? In life, life is right here. I survived cancer twice. I can't go waste this for my own sake, for my family, and for the world, right? I think I had something to give. I just didn't know what the heck it was. So, right, 14 years old, kind of a shithead at that time. I didn't have the best grades in school. I'm just, an average middle schooler, becoming a high schooler. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I said maybe I wanted to be a firefighter, maybe an astronaut, maybe some guy in geography. I didn't have a damn clue. All I knew is I love video games, as you do too, right?
True.
I love video games. That's what got me through a lot of this. And I played some video games, like I remember like Call of Duty, Black Ops, things like that, right? That got me excited as a kid, right? And that would probably still get me excited. I don't play video games anymore, but at that time I saw an opportunity. And I'm not saying I found it because of cancer, right? I found it because I played video games, and I started this online video gaming tournament company where essentially we build brackets online. I handmade the website using HTML and CSS, which I just picked up from one of those fat books at Barnes and Noble. I remember I'm reading it, I'm copying the code line for line, and I just put something together. And then I sent it to a colleague of mine who played video games and was actually a web designer, and he said, "Pete, this is awful." He said, "This is awful." And then he actually went and he built it. I launched it. And then 3 years later, at the age of 18, I ended up liquidating it, selling it for pieces, because the whole idea that I had initially was, this is something good. I'm going to get my feet wet. And then I'm going to go to university and actually go do something great after that. At the time, I didn't know esports would be a multi-billion-dollar industry, and maybe now I have a little bit of regret, though, maybe a little bit. But nonetheless, at the age of 18, I recognize something. I recognize that I have a lot more to give than video games, and that I love business, and I love entrepreneurship, right? Nobody wants to go work a job from 9 to 5, or at least I didn't. Maybe some people do, not me. So at that time, I started consulting small businesses and helping small businesses in my hometown of Worcester, Massachusetts. And, you know, I'm proud of the great state of Massachusetts and some of the businesses there. But I saw restaurants that were struggling. They were doing a terrible job with their branding, their marketing. And I went in as a possibly arrogant 18-year-old and I said, hey, can I come in and do a redesign for you? Mock up some menus, help your pricing strategies, really things that I had learned over that last 3 years since I started the video gaming company. And I applied it into the local community, saw a little bit of impact. Then I shipped off to the Rochester Institute of Technology for 4 years, where I continued a lot of things, but most importantly, I took a little bit of cash and invested it into some startups. Because, maybe I was just a little bit egotistical, and I said, why not invest in some companies that'll provide this monstrosity of a return? We're going to have the next Elon Musk, the next Tesla. I want a little piece of that, even if it's $10,000, $20,000.
It was just a guess, those startups that you sponsored?
No, I lost all my money. It was a wild guess. Oh. And that's where it kind of led me up a little bit, where, now I can say maybe I've been an investor for over, 10 years, yeah. That the term investor is, eyes in the sky, wild. So I started investing in companies during college. People thought it was crazy. I was advising companies because I had one small exit, which the exit may have, dragged me down into the ground. Still an exit. So, long story short, I then ended up going to work for Bank of America for, over 5 years. Started with an internship. 5 years later, that's kind of my journey. Data engineering, business intelligence. I started using AI ML before it was popular, before ChatGPT was probably even a conception in Sam Altman's head. And then last November, I ended up deciding to take a retirement. I decided to retire. Do I look like I'm ready to retire?
Oh, of course not, Simon. I had that question prepared for you. You said you were going to retire last November, but you came back actually.
It was probably the shortest lived retirement that you could picture. I retire at the end of November, right? Retire, and we can get into that in a second. The month of December, I was dealing with real estate problems. I was dealing with tenants that we had to possibly evict, turnover. So the month of December was probably a wash. It was a complete wash. The month of January into early February, I escaped. On January 1st, actually, I took a plane all the way to Japan and kind of backpacked my way through Thailand after that. So I went for Tokyo for 5 days. Had a nice chill time. Then I went to Thailand. Then I zipped over to Shanghai for the Lunar New Year. And then I went to Seoul, South Korea. And when I was in South Korea, I remember distinctively, I was sitting at a Korean barbecue place. And I said to myself, what the hell am I doing? I enjoy travel, but this isn't with purpose. This is just me hanging out, having fun. Having fun! And it was fun. But I realized, yeah, there's a lot more here that we can do. So I came back in February to my house in Virginia. I said, let's just see what's happening. Let's just see what's happening with some of my portfolio companies, my colleagues in both Armenia, Greece, and America. Let's see what's happening with real estate. I said, okay. There's not much happening. And then one day in mid-February, I get a phone call from a guy, which we'll probably talk about a lot more in this conversation. His name's Sergey Shestakov. He's the CEO of MPP Labs, based here in Armenia. It's a data engineering company.
Okay.
They do projects for major companies and major enterprises. And I quit Bank of America because I absolutely hate that field. I hated everything about data engineering and business intelligence. And we could get into the reasons why, but he called me and he said, Pete, I booked a flight for March to come out to Virginia. And I remember I said, shit, what is this guy gonna do here? He wants to open up his company in America. I'll actually tell you the whole story here if you want.
Yeah, and tell me why you decided to open his company in US also. Because there's, like, I can see there are a lot of companies trying to move to US most of the time, especially startups. I know easy answer is because all the tech giants are there and easy to get an investment, but is there anything else also?
Well, honestly, that's not the right answer. That's why people are tricked into coming to America, because they think, well, every other company's here, so why not me? They have FOMO. They really have FOMO here. But that's not why I think the US is a great opportunity to enter into. And you have to be very strategic when you enter into the US market. It's kind of like entering into the OCC countries, right? You enter into the UAE market, you always have to start with a partnership, with a joint venture, to go and sell any company. And Sergey approached me last June, all the way last June, before I quit Bank of America. And he said to me on a call, just a casual catch up. He said, Peter, I want to open up a US office for MPP Labs. And I said, oh, that sounds like fun. Good for you, Sergey. And he said, where should I open it? And I said, well, there's some great cities like, of course, New York, Boston, you want to do anything with data, San Francisco. And then I had this ridiculous thought to tell him to come do business in Richmond, Virginia, which the other three cities I mentioned are significantly larger. They have biotech, they have software, they have everything. And then Richmond, Virginia, he thought, I have never been there. Tell me about it. And I said, well, I live here. It's a great city, growing city. We got fintech companies, healthcare companies, this and that. He said, okay, I will come. And he said, when do you want to have me? I said, well, the best time to visit Virginia is in March. We have some great tech conferences. RVA Tech is one of them, major regional conference. And he said, okay, then we'll book it. And then he comes back to me February saying he booked the ticket. I thought this man completely forgot about this entire thing. I thought I was just gonna sell him on Virginia a little bit and maybe he'll listen in 5 years. Because that's typically what happens with Armenian companies. I'll give a piece of advice and they never follow through with it. And then I'm like, okay, well, I had no stake in it anyways, just a piece of advice. He actually booked a flight and came out to Virginia for 2 weeks to try and do business there because he recognized the value of doing business in the state of Virginia, which it's not a niche market by no means. It's the #1 state in the US to do business. Again, right? There's other major cities that someone could choose to open up an office. Yeah. But he decided, after we wined and dined him in the great city of Richmond, that he would open up an office there. And that ended up turning into a joint venture between me and his company. And now he's opening and launching MPP Insights, which is the main US entity for data engineering and business intelligence services. Long story short, he wanted to do business there because, it's where I live. And he really came there not to do business in Virginia, but to do business with me. Let me clarify this actually. He wanted to do business in Virginia. Though most importantly, he wanted to do business with me because also he recognized that I was considered a free agent at that time.
What does free agent means?
Free agent is more or less, I don't work for a company. And
Okay.
retired. Terrible way to put it, by the way. Retirement's not really the term for it. We need to come up with a better term for people that don't work early, but they're not unemployed. Maybe it's fun employed.
There's one question always like walking in my mind while we are having this discussion. In the beginning, you mentioned that at some point you understood that there is something that you need to bring to this world. There is something big that you want to do for this world. And at the same time, last year, November, like, what was the reason that you're like, okay, I need to retire? Do you feel that you already bring that greatness to the world? That's why you decided to do the retirement? Or it was just like a more burnout type of thing where you just need at least a couple of months to go away, have some rest, and come back with fresh power and forces?
If I told you right now,
Okay.
right, we're sitting here in May, nearly 6-7 months later. If I told you that I was well rested, that would be a lie. And I would not tell you or your audience that. I've been working harder than ever with some of my portfolio companies. Complete twist from what happened before. Now, the pivotal moment is I realized corporations in the US have a lot of politics, to say it lightly. And I did not want to be part of that politics. I didn't feel it was great for my well-being to deal with people who are political and wanted to put someone on the fire, roast on the fire for their own salary, for their own bravado. It just wasn't me. I did not align with their values. Now, I'm not going to go rip on a company. A lot of companies say, we believe ... But that's not really the case when it comes to implementation. They can say all the shit in the world, but you have to live it. You have to live those values. And they did not live those values. And I did not believe in the values that they were portraying. So there was a major misalignment. Besides the fact that I was skipped over for a promotion to run a department. I was skipped over for a lot of different things. And I didn't believe in the direction that the department was going.
So it wasn't retirement, actually. It was just like a small step back to understand what to do next. Can we put it that way?
I think that would be a decent way to characterize it.
Okay.
I needed to reevaluate where I was going. And I recognized at that time when I was working for the bank that I just can't be wasting my time on this. As we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, I'm a 2-time cancer survivor.
Yeah.
Only God knows how long we have. And why am I wasting my time saving these guys money for shareholders when I already have a portfolio full of companies that could be doing better? And I want to go maybe buy some businesses, do some philanthropy work, just get my hand dirty and do something that actually makes an impact for people.
What about the failures? I wonder how you overcome all these entrepreneurial, philanthropical failure loop. Because it's a tough one. I mean, it might be not that tough as people can imagine. It depends of your life story. It depends of your own background, right? Because, for example, you mentioned you are a 2-time cancer survivor. You already know one of the shittiest struggles in the world started from 6 years old.
Yes.
And especially when you're coming from that type of things, you already know that, like, I mean, what can go wrong? And you already saw one of the worst scenarios in your life, right? You can just overcome it one way or another. It hits differently from one person to another because someone can say that, oh, you know what, my struggle is greater than yours because I have a family and I don't know how to feed them. Well, whereas the second one will say, what do you know about life? I took a bullet and barely got survived. And third one can say completely other thing. But everything comes to the same point, like how you personally or how person overcome the obstacles and handle the failures some sort of way. I would love to hear your opinion about it. Like, how did you overcome it?
You know, I think that is a fantastic question because nobody ever asked me about my failures, right? And I have to kind of go back into the back of my brain, pull something up. You know, I have an interesting philosophy around failure, actually. When it comes to entrepreneurial ventures, I use the analogy, we throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall. We take a handful of spaghetti, we throw it at the wall, and we find out what sticks. And if it doesn't stick, I'm not emotionally damaged by it. I'm not cooked if something fails. But I think the only reason someone would be cooked would be if you're working with the wrong people and you're not aligned, again, on the same values. So, for example, if we fail together, you and I working on the business together, and we know we're throwing a little bit of spaghetti at the wall, and then we go and fail, you and I know, okay, well, we tried. Yeah. But there's some people who take that and they say, this is bad. Yeah, personal. They can't separate personal and business, which is a big thing that I talk about, work-life balance. And this is just entrepreneurial things. You go and solve someone's problem. You throw a little bit of spaghetti at the wall. And if you don't solve the problem, you can either A, keep digging, or B, try and solve a different problem. But when it comes to failure, failure only happens for a few reasons. Either the problem you're solving can't be monetized, you have the wrong team, or you don't have the right solution, really, at all. You're nowhere near on the solution. I see so many pitch decks. I've probably gotten hundreds of pitch decks from potential companies that wanted me to invest in them. And I see it all the time. They say, we have the best solution for XYZ. And I say, well, what problem are you actually solving? You just built something expecting to go at customers. The reason people fail is because they don't know the customers. For example, if you want to open up any type of business, and you said, Pete, I want $50,000. I would say, great. Show me your customers first. Who's going to buy this? Give me something that says from them, I will purchase this if you build it. That's all I want. Sounds like a simple ask, right? It's not. It's absolutely not. They will never provide this if they are illegitimate. I'll give you an example. I'll give you a terrible example, actually. In the great country of the Republic of Armenia, there are great software outsourcing companies here. They do a fantastic job building great products, apps, websites for companies outside of Armenia. And since 2022, when the Ukraine-Russian war started, the Armenian dram appreciated by about 20%. And the value proposition for these American companies to go outsource to Armenia, it was teetering. It was teetering because a 20% increase in price or a 20% decrease on the bottom line is not ideal for anyone. So the model for a lot of these companies said, well, now we can go become a venture studio. You would not believe the amount of shit that I get in my email inbox that came directly from outsourcing companies here.
What's the reason?
They want to make money.
I mean, of course, everyone wants to make money at the end of the day, but what's the reason?
They don't have enough work coming in, so they decide to pivot their business model to just open up companies, spit out companies. And again, throwing spaghetti at a wall. They're not really solving problems. It's just a couple of guys that have no skin in the game for the actual problem that say, this sounds good. This sounds good. Okay, team, let's build an MVP. And then, after we build the MVP, let's go raise some capital. And then they become serial idiots. That's how I describe it. I'll tell you a quick story about this, actually. The other day, someone sent me a pitch deck for exactly this. They're raising $50,000 for a startup. That's exactly this. They came right from an outsourcing company. They wanted $50,000. And then I said, spread it out for me. Show me. They read it line by line. 17.5 grand of that goes directly towards paying the people at the software developing company for the work that they were doing. They had no customers. They had no proof of concept at all. And they barely even had a product. And they were just doing essentially business development on investors to give them capital. So 17.5 grand for solely that, right? We're not even talking about the rest. I would look at that and I say, well, if you already have the people working for you, why are the founders and the executives of that software development company fronting the cash for it? Why does it have to be some investor? Why can't they actually put the money up front to pay your employees to get a proof of concept and then bring it to investors?
Well, that's a good question, and that was the question that I would ask them also. I mean, basically, when it comes to developing something or developing the idea, right? The idea by itself, it's not a big thing. Generating the creative, a good idea is not a big deal right now, right? Everyone can generate an idea. It's about how quick you can execute it and how big you can find clients. And to give it out clients also doesn't make sense for the investment, from the investment side, right? I can build an MVP, but I have to first go find potential clients, get some feedback, do some user acquisition before coming and saying, hey, give me some money, right? I mean, that's how I understand the flow of entrepreneurship, in tech entrepreneurship and startup culture. Because I can't come to you and say, give me some money if I have the product, I don't have any more. Besides, it could be like a very rare case and found out like a particular problem that market is starting to get a solution, and then I can say, hey, they just help me to build it out, then or I give you extra equity and stuff, but help me with it.
Yes, right. Maybe you have common sense. I think you have common sense here. I think we're on the right track. I think we may accomplish something here. I think we should be going to these companies and telling them how to actually go start a company. We consult them with starting companies.
Well, like another educational course type.
But maybe we have to start some courses to sell.
Yeah.
Also a terrible idea. Maybe we need the P.Bilzerian courses on how to not screw up.
Well, actually, that's a very good point.
Oh, no.
No, not the lesson part.
Oh, okay.
Lesson part in it. There are a bunch of lessons and study shows that it's not helping most of the time. It's just not helping people. I mean, from 100 people who bought your course, maybe one or two can actually get it. Oh, that's a big thing. But the thing is that right now, we are worshipping the success stories and diminishing the failures of persons. And that brings us in a situation where everyone is a hero in social media. Doesn't matter what they do. I mean, the same software development companies, founders, can just build it or just have it printed somewhere and say, hey, we invented this. And they will be appreciated more than a guy who invents something and failed and talk very little about it.
I think it's less of social media. I actually think it's more of culture. I think it's a cultural issue.
But the same issue is everywhere.
Oh, it's everywhere. No, it is everywhere. It is a cultural issue everywhere. People want to just show you the successes, but not show you the failures. And I actually think differently. I think a lot differently. I want to show people failures. I want to show people failures because you can learn more from a failure than a success. A lot of the time, successes are by luck. And when you go and look at a lucky company, you're going to say, wow, these guys work so hard, when they may as well just be clowns sometimes who just had the right business at the right time. And again, that happens a lot. So we can't just fantasize when we see these guys. And this is why I enjoy talking about failures. And I enjoy talking about ideas that may have never been executed. Let me tell you something that I think here. I love boring businesses, like very boring businesses. We're talking laundromats, car washes, simple things that regular people will use. Essentially, commodities. So you got to do your laundry. You got to wash your car, maybe. These are things that people are going to use. You can simply transform them with some branding, a better technology stack. And this is where I say, I doubt that any of these startup founders that approach me could go and run a car wash successfully. I just seriously doubt it. Laundromats have a success rate of 95%. And I still think these guys would manage to screw it up. They think we're going to have to raise $1 million for this car wash. We need to do a rebranding. We got to do some development.
Why is it? Why acquiring $1 million and giving away an equity? Like, I think there is some sort of misunderstanding actually going on when it comes to investment and how actually investment works, right? Could you try to elaborate in a quick way, how exactly invested money is working? Because there's sort of audition going on, right? You can't just take $1 million, spend it over and do nothing with that money. Eventually, investor can come up and say, where's the money? Where's the expense list? Where's the invoices and stuff?
Well, you always have to audit your companies. That's the first off. If you give anyone money, of course you have to. Because some of these guys could just take your money and disappear. Now, when it comes to how do you evaluate, the line items that the company is proposing to spend with your money and the line items that they want to spend it on or they have spent it on, right? There's two different things here. When you raise your $100,000 from me and I write you a nice check, you're going to tell me, hey, Pete, I want to spend it on this, this, and this. This is my burn rate. This is how long it's going to run me. And this is what we're going to accomplish. But then when I come back in a year and I say, show me the receipts, you damn well better be ready to show those receipts on what you spent and stack it against the KPIs that you set when we wrote that check. A lot of the times, when I go back the second time, let's just say that ain't happening. That ain't happening. They probably failed. They took longer than expected. Or maybe they pivoted. I love it when a startup pivots, though. I love it when a startup pivots because that implies that they found something that could actually be monetizable and useful to people rather than the direction they were going. Pivoting is great. I'll tell you a quick story about a great pivot that I love. There's a company in the US called Superflex. Now, they essentially transform Figma designs into code using AI. So the OpenAI model. And how that company started is fascinating because the guy who started it, his name is Ibeck Jagenberning. He's a very good friend of mine. He started a company. He quit his job at a startup probably over 1.5 years ago. And I told him, I said, Ibeck, you're absolutely insane to go and want to start up yourself without any idea what that would be. It's basically, he's jumping off a cliff and he doesn't know if there's rocks underneath. But he has a mindset like no other, which is why, him and I are very good friends. We're both kind of adventurous, maybe a little bit crazy. And I said, Ibeck, what are you gonna do here? What are you gonna do? What kind of company? He said, I'm gonna go find a co-founder who's technical. He's not a technical guy. And we'll just figure something out. Well, it wasn't like that. It was a little bit more professional. Now, I'm not going to characterize it, we're just figuring it out. No. He had a lot of ideas in his head. Much like me, right? I'm a visionary. I'm an idea person. He had a lot of ideas in his head, but didn't have technical prowess to execute it. But then he found someone on the Y Combinator matching program, and they first started a company, an HR startup. And he did customer discovery with hundreds of HR professionals. And he built out this cool platform called Sprout. And then as they were building it, here's what happened. They were exactly using a tool that transformed Figma designs into code. And something went off in his brain that said, what? This is something that we should sell. We shouldn't be selling to HR. They're a bunch of cheap bastards. They're not going to go pay for this. So then they founded Superflex as a hard pivot from HR whatever into something that can be used by developers that people will actually use and pay for. Right now, I think they have over 10,000 users as we speak. And I call that a great success. And I think they were number one on Product Hunt for a while. And I think maybe they still are. It's a fast-growing company.
Superflex? How's it called?
Superflex.ai.
Superflex.
Write it down. Go use it. I'm not promoting it, but it's a great story about how good it's actually work. I'll tell you something else that's interesting about this whole ordeal. He's a very curious guy, and I think curiosity is the one trait that I look for in founders. If you are curious, if you will take a piece of string like this and you keep pulling it and find out where you get, you're the type of guy I want to work with. But if you're not, if you're very hard-headed, closed-minded, I don't want to work with that. I really don't want to work with that. And that's one of the things that I evaluate when I look at the founders. I don't want to work with someone who's not open to pivot, or does, oh God, here's the worst thing. When I tell them the truth, and they're in denial. Founders in denial is a poison pill for your company. If you go to a founder and you tell them, here, this is how it is, and they're in denial, they are going to kill their company. What typically happens is, sometimes you tell them, hey, you got to get into this market, or you got to do this, or something's wrong here. And they say, no, it's fine. It's fine. I got this. There's a point where you have to listen to your advisory board and your investors. And typically, every time, we failed. The companies that have hard-headed founders fail.
But it's like 50-50 deal, right? You have to be in some sort of denial also when you actually truly believe that you found that hidden gem. And that's the part of entrepreneurship. If you can come up with an idea and everyone can tell you that it's just another birding, but it can be like a very successful one. Also, there are a lot of stores like that, I believe.
I talk in dollars. If the dollars don't speak, that the founder is right.
For sure. We're talking about the already pivoted, already started product for that as, for example, 1 year of something in the market that's still, speaking of dollars, they're nowhere. Then yeah, that's a red flag, that's a signal. And if you talk to them and explaining to them a very denial, that's already like no deal.
That's true.
Yeah.
The companies that bleed the money.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I find that I've seen so many companies that just bleed money. And it's typically bleeding to a painful death.
You spoke about like luck. the existence of luck, that people sometimes get really lucky. And I wonder, what role do you think that the same luck has played in your journey?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I do consider myself a very lucky guy. Let me tell you a piece of luck. I don't often tell this story. When I was interviewing with Bank of America for an internship so many years ago, I remember, they had a super day where they bring all these people to New York, and, they essentially interview a lot of people. Some people got offers on the spot, some people did not. I did not get an offer on the spot. But then, some great guy decided to take a chance on me. I never met the guy at all. I didn't interview with him, but he took a chance on me. I consider myself very lucky in that case. And he ended up being one of the greatest people to work for in my entire career. Because after he took a chance on me, and we were very successful, I worked for another guy, and then he took another chance on me to work for him a second time. And unfortunately, it didn't yield well because of an organizational flip that got him promoted 2 times. So I wanted to work for the guy so bad because, I consider it luck. I really do consider the start of great things luck, but it's what you do with that luck after you get it which matters. I sometimes believe that fate gets us to the table, but it's what we do after. That's what we have control over.
Yeah. When it comes to founders, you mentioned your friend, the AI business, that the first thing that he told you that he's going to find a co-founder, a tech co-founder to enter to the journey with it. And before that, you also mentioned the values, the personal values that people is carrying, that if they should embody the philosophy that they're talking about, they should really know their shit. And that makes me wonder how someone who's watching it right now want to start the business and looking for somebody or have somebody already, but still don't know whether or not it's a good card to play and do some co-founding business with his friend or someone else, how they need to evaluate all this and have some clear understanding whether or not do it or not.
Finding a co-founder is like dating. It is exactly dating. Just not romantically. Because you have to live with them. Essentially, you're slipping a ring on your co-founder's finger once you start that first LLC. You are married to them through thick and thin. I'm not good at that sort of thing. I'm not married, so I don't have experience saying that. You're essentially marrying them. And which is why the dating phase is so important. In relationships, a lot of people are quick to jump into a relationship and just try and figure it out or go get married after they just meet someone. That's typically what happens with founders. They meet someone and then they immediately get married. They basically walk to the courthouse, run to the courthouse, and get married. Which is not the way to approach this. Before I ever get in bed with anyone for business, I have to know them for a long time now. I am tried and tested. I have had bad experiences with co-founders. Sometimes you figure out over time their values do not align with yours. Or maybe they're A, manipulative, or B, they're just not compatible. So I think it starts with the values, right? And I'm not your dating coach.
No.
I promise. But here, let me tell you, I'm not your dating coach, but your values got to align with your partner. Yeah. That's the first thing, right? If you believe in, X, Y, Z, they should believe in that, or at least respect your beliefs on that. Where it's not a deal breaker, where you could break up over that. Second, you have, in at least not dating, but in business, you need to have some sort of complementary skill sets. You want to have the bad cop and the good cop. That's how I do business with people. You know, I'm typically the bad guy though.
So you're the bad cop.
Yeah, I'm the bad cop. And sometimes we have other people who are the good cops that, you know, don't scare people as much. You know, I'm a scary guy. I've tried to tell you this many times. I'm a scary guy when it comes to business. You know, let me tell you about how scary I am too. When someone starts to work with me, they sometimes get scared. I have a level of execution that we need to meet, and I'll mentor and coach people to get them there. Most of the people that have worked for me in the past, I have pushed them, I have elevated them, I have made them great, and it's tough. It's a rough process.
That's a part of a journey.
Of course it is. It's part of their journey. And here's the thing. They want to continue their journey with me after I push them so hard. A lot of it is because I care, right? That's why, right? I think great leadership is genuinely caring about someone and pushing them to be better. And that's the same thing in relationships too. Think about it. And it's not just the business partners, it's the people that work for you.
Yeah.
And I call it a team effort for that reason. Well, maybe it's one and the same. Your partners, you work with your partners, you work with your team. And this is why a lot of the times in pitch decks, what a red flag that nobody really talks about is when you have the team slide on your deck, and if you have the CEO this big, the CTO this big, and then underneath it you have other team members in a much smaller design, it says a little something about your organization. Subconsciously, it says, well, maybe your team's a little bit inferior to you. That's not the case. And that's why in all of my pitch decks, for anything that we've ever built, everybody's the same size. Everybody's equal. And that's how we should treat it. And that's also how we should treat relationships, too. In friendships, everybody's equal. Nobody's better. I'm not better than anyone. I promise you that. I'm just some average guy from America who does a thing here or there.
No, you took the shot. That's the difference between you, for example, and somebody else. That's a completely other story. That's a completely other story where like this whole podcasting and all that happens in the world, like people are trying to show another people who took the shot go through a lot of hell of a stuff and achieve something. Even if you not achieve anything, you had a very great experience. Like you had a journey that you can at least tell about it, and it might help to somebody else. That's the main difference.
I think a lot of people are just too scared.
Of what?
Failure. Because again, what you talked about earlier, it's about social media and the view of it, the optics. And that's what it is. They're afraid of the optics of failure. Now me, I'm not.
Or success. I tend to believe that like fear of success sometimes is even bigger than failure, especially for the people who already had some background of failure. They know how it feels, but they, for example, if you're just starting and they failed over and over again, at some point you may start to fear of success because you don't know how it's going to feel.
I think it's an interesting thought, right? I don't think people personally are afraid of success as much as they should be. Success, the thing that people should be afraid of in success is fame. It's a spotlight. We have a spotlight on us right now. But imagine if you had a spotlight, a microscope looking at every aspect of your life. This is what happens with founders, with celebrities. They have to have optics. They have to have the same consistency every time you go out into public. Me? Listen, I consider myself mildly successful. And maybe I'm like a D-list celebrity here in Armenia. If that, I'm probably not. But people have walked up to me on the street randomly saying, "Oh, you're Peter, nice to meet you." Fame? Listen, I have experience with fame. Not me personally, but members of my family have a degree of fame, and that's where I see them, and I see the image they portray in the actual person, and there is a major disconnect between the two. I'll tell you that.
No.
And it's less of the fear of failure, though. I think, well, less of the fear of success. They should be afraid of success with the spotlight sometimes, unless you can manage that. Unless someone wants that.
That's a completely other.
I know, that's a whole different story. But when it comes to failure, I think people are just afraid of failing publicly for whatever reason. Maybe it's financially, maybe you have to support a family, and maybe they break under pressure. Maybe people just naturally will break under pressure, and they don't want that pressure on them in the first place.
And then they took the 9-to-5 corporate job and continued to hate themselves because they didn't get a chance and stay for less somehow. What will be your advice to these type of people who are juggling between 9-to-5 jobs and trying to break it out and do something else?
Oof. I think that conversation is about financial autonomy.
Yeah.
I think that's where the conversation here should go. When it comes to how do you break out, it's about financial autonomy.
It's more like financial literacy.
Exactly. Well, less of the literacy part. I think it's more of having a goal at the end and building a plan to get there. The literacy, do I even consider myself financially literate? Sometimes not. It's about going out there and making more money than you had before and spending a little bit less. Right? There's two things here. Spending and making money. As long as you're making more money than you're spending, you're good. That's the literacies that someone should know on the most basic level. When it comes to actually becoming financially independent and breaking out of the 9-to-5 job, there are many ways to start this. And I talk about this when I do public speaking and webinars. How do you actually build financial autonomy? And what does financial autonomy look like? I think that's what you're curious about. Another loaded question. Maybe it's best if I tell you my journey with financial autonomy. I think that would be the best way to share a narrative. A lot of my portfolio started with the real estate. A majority of my portfolio is real estate. It is the foundational asset class when it comes to any type of investment. Why is it foundational? Because like this building, it sits on a piece of land. You can't go replicate land. Well, maybe you can if you're Dubai and you want to build out a whole island and sell houses on it. But generally, you cannot replicate land. Land is not an unlimited asset class. Houses, you can build a house on top of it, but the land, that's important. You want to go buy something that you can live in too. How you de-risk it is by buying an asset that you can actually use at the same time. So let me give you an example, right? In the US, there is a term called house hacking that a lot of young professionals use when they want to go buy a house, but they don't want to go sink it like it's just a luxurious mansion in Beverly Hills. They want to go buy a house that doesn't lose them money. How you do that? You buy a house with 4 bedrooms, you live in one of them, you rent out the other 3, and you offset your mortgage. And maybe you make a little bit of cash on that to pay for the repairs. So the opportunity cost, let's say you were previously renting an apartment for $2,000, and then now you have a mortgage of $3,000 or $4,000. And let's say you break even on the house that you purchased by renting out rooms to friends or even potentially strangers that you vetted. You are saving $2,000 a month from the opportunity cost of renting out an apartment for yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So every month that you live in your house, you are essentially saving $2,000 of your earned income over the course of the year. That's about $24,000. Mathematically, and at least in the US, That's almost enough for a down payment on a decently inexpensive house. In America, when you sign a mortgage paper, they give you a fat stack of paper, about this many. It's probably 50 signatures throughout the whole thing. One of those pieces of paper is very important. That is the intent to live at the property you purchase. Remember, intent to live there for 1 year, 1 whole year. If I house, I want to live there for a year. I'm going to move out of where I live and move into that house. So, the strategy with that, every single year, you go buy a new house and you fully rent out the previous one. That is the simplest way to do it. And let's say you save your $24,000 from your rent. That's almost enough every single year in just savings. It's just buying the first house, which is the challenge. So simply speaking, that's how I started too. In the first year, I think it was in even like 2020, I purchased my first property, and I did exactly that. 4 bedrooms, rented out the 3, and fortunately we had a great interest rate at that time. So, it was a little more consumable for me. And so that's how we got the real estate party started. And now, one of the ventures that I have is property management of real estate in Richmond, Virginia. So besides the 5 properties I have, we manage another 4 right now. It used to be 5, but one of them sold. So 9 properties under that portfolio of both managing it and also working with outside investors. So for example, we have investors in Dubai that want to purchase property in Virginia. So I help facilitate that process as the property manager. So I'll be there, I'll kind of be the guy that helps acquire the property, right? We'll send them the lead. Then once we purchase the property, we go and renovate the property. I enjoy that part of this. I love renovating properties. Before I could walk, I remember I had my father gave me a hammer, like a child hammer.
Yeah.
I think it was foam or something, but before I could even walk, I had a hammer in my hand to build things. So I just love working on properties. I don't know why I like it so much. It's just hands-on. So we'll renovate the property, and then we rent out. And then once we go and sell it, we facilitate it from A to Z. The purchase, the renovation, the rental, and then the sale.
And you earn extra on each step also.
Of course. And they make out sometimes, when they go and purchase a property, out me as a joint venture on it, they make out really well. They do make out really well. I will tell you that even with a fee that I charge on that, that's a good business. And that's an example of a boring business too.
Right.
Oh God, that's a very boring business. Most of the people in property management that run property management in Virginia are white men over the age of 60.
Seriously.
Demographically,
Whoa.
if you go to one of their real estate networking events, these are all old white men, and most of them I consider to be crooked. Oh, they're slumlords. They're absolute slumlords. I don't mince my words. Listen, I don't mince my words. They are crooked old men. And nobody wants to break into that industry.
Because they're afraid, or because it's boring? Or because...
Oh, because it's boring. It's boring.
But the bigger the business is boring, the bigger is the checks that you can find out there, right?
Well, for me, maybe. But I operate L&O Ventures as a company that does good. We are not here to go rip off, the person who owned the property. We're not there to rip off the tenant either. We actually care to build relationships with everybody. And, we're not charging like ridiculous amounts for rent. I'll tell you how bad this is, too. I'll tell you how bad this is. And it drives me crazy. Some of these guys charge ridiculous fees to the owners. So, for example, if you go and sell the property, well, you're under a property management contract with me, and you decide to go sell it, you know how much they will charge?
Tell me.
Almost 5% of the property value. Just in a fee. So you're breaking the contract, you're selling it, I want 5% of your property value.
Just a common practice, 5%, or it's just like...
I don't know if it's very common.
Okay.
I hope it's not. I consider that predatory on top of all the fees that these guys charge to property owners. This is why I said one day, I'm doing this myself. I will always do this myself or hire someone to work for me. I just can't stand when I meet a potential tenant or property owner that says to me, oh, so what's the catch? Because there's always something else written in this small text on the contract. Drive me crazy. Back to what you were kind of asking me about, though, is the journey to get to financial autonomy. Real estate is probably the foundational layer to getting to financial autonomy. And then every other asset class is above it in terms of risk. So let's say it's a scale between riskiness, lowest risk and highest risk. The bottom, real estate. You would have to try very hard to mess up when it comes to real estate. Above that, you have things that you have less control over. So you have maybe boring businesses on top of that. They produce cash, a little bit more risk. And you have public stocks, bonds, ETFs, things that you don't have control over. And then above that, highest risk, startup companies.
I remember the other day when we were talking about your investment portfolio, you mentioned about the fate and fire. Could you explain me how does fate redefine this financial freedom of professionals?
That's a great question. Okay, so I'll actually explain what I meant. Yes. FIRE, it stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. It is a movement. It is Facebook groups full of people asking questions about, where's the cheapest place to live? How can I max this out? How to become a millionaire? It's become a movement, a bit of a weird community of people that want to achieve financial independence and live below their mean. There's probably 30 different acronyms. It's all acronyms. And it drives my head crazy. I am not like any of these guys. All they want to do is sit on a beach. They don't want to work after they retire. That's their idea. The whole idea with the acronym, you gain financial independence, and then you heard it, retire early. Retire, again, as we talked about earlier, has such a weird connotation to it. So I did a little bit of digging, and I did a little bit of brainstorming, and I came up with a new acronym that I've been using in my speeches lately. It's called FATE. Financial autonomy, then transform everything. But then it's kind of like a filler word.
Okay.
FATE. Financial autonomy, transform everything. Or, yeah. So when FATE, the idea behind FATE was you gain your autonomy so that you don't have to be married to a corporate job. That's the first part. You don't want to be married to a corporate job. And then after that, you can go make an impact. You can be emboldened to go make an impact on the world once you have the financial footing where you don't have to worry about the money, and you can care less about how much money you make, and you can focus solely on the impact that you make on the world. The idea behind FATE is impact. At the end of the day, it's impact. Just simply, I can't overstate it. You're not going to go sit on a beach, play around, read books all day. That's how people will decline. And especially if you're early 30s, what are you going to do? Read books for, 50-something years? No. You have to do something that is that is going to make you feel fulfilled at the end of the day?
Helping others. That's the most egocentric
Yeah.
way of things. Right?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's also about exploring, both exploring the world and exploring yourself. I think part of it is understanding what makes you happy. What makes you genuinely happy at the end of the day, where you can go to bed, have a smile on your face, and feel fulfilled. And quite frankly, a lot of people ask me that, they say, are you happy? Are you fulfilled? And the answer is, I'm getting there, right? I'm getting there. I gotta figure it out still. Because that genuinely, right? I don't know where I'm gonna be in 5 years. That's why I hate the interview question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And say, I don't know. I don't have a damn clue where I'm gonna be in 5 or 10 years. And it's the same thing here. When someone says, what's your purpose? What do what do you want your life's mission to be? I give them that analogy again. You give a piece of string and you just keep pulling it out of curiosity and you find out where you get. A lot of people probably would disagree with that. They say you need to have an end goal in mind with strict KPIs. Nah, that ain't me. That ain't me. And honestly, I think the curiosity route is much better because it goes back to a lot of the things we talked about here. Pivoting.
Yeah.
I can go and pivot far easier when I am financially autonomous. That's how I think about it, at least. And I think a takeaway for Navy or audience would be, you don't have to worry if you don't have it figured out at the age of 30 or the age of 40 even. You can always go and figure it out later.
It's just about willing to do this.
If you're just gonna sit back and blame others.
The blame game. The blame game. You could blame so many things on other people. You could blame so many things on the things that have happened to you. I could blame everything in my life on cancer. I could blame everything in my life that has happened to me on other people. My upbringing, I don't know. You name it, you can blame. But I honestly, again, fate got us here. Not fate acronym. Maybe it is the fate acronym. Fate got us here, and it's what we do with it. You don't have to, analyze your past to shreds.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's the way to do it. And also the other thing, the future is full of anxiety, right? The past is depression, I think, and the future is anxiety. So you live in the present. That's what and honestly, I still need to work on that too, right? Me and with anyone, you gotta work on that. Sometimes we focus too much on the future and the future state that it gives us anxiety. And we don't have our eyes on the ball and we're not focused in the moment. So one of the things that I've worked on for this year is living more in the moment. Whether it's hanging out with friends or, doing business, just being more present. Because in the last 5-6 years, I think that as I, worked, a lot of my potential was kind of being dumbed down and my motivation and drive went down. Because as you kind of work the same routines, you get more comfortable and you get more. You don't want to grow. You don't want to grow after you work at these companies for so long. And maybe sometimes I want a little bit of pressure, a little bit of anxiety. Maybe I do. I don't know. But I wasn't living in the present while I was working at, in the corporate life. Which is weird. I mean, I probably still have a lot of retrospection to still do. I still probably need to debrief myself. I call it corporate trauma. It is corporate trauma. You gotta unwind a lot of the routines and practices after being in that world for so long, part of it's how you work with people. You can't just say, I need this, this, and this done. We will do this. And okay, come back. You just can't do that in the real world. And you can't say things like, let's look back on this, or send ridiculous corporate jargon in emails that I absolutely despise. And just that old thing with the corporate jargon, it's just, I had to kind of train myself to stop even come close to using that. Generally, I am unfiltered. And they had put a filter on me for years, both publicly and while I worked there. A lot of the things that I do, if you ever go on the internet, I couldn't talk about them. I couldn't talk about any of the things that I worked on. And even, now, should I go talk about them? And even when it comes to my own personal ventures, I couldn't go on the internet and talk about some of my personal ventures.
You mentioned many times, even day before that, we were talking that startup business, as you mentioned today also, is the most risky ones. And the other day when we were talking about the investments in the startups, you said it usually takes for investor on 3 to 5 years to have some sort of return on investment from the startup in an ideal scenario. And sometimes even up to 10 years, if I'm not mistaken.
And oh yeah, it's a lot more if you ever get a return.
If you ever get a return.
A lot of the time, you're never going to get a return. I've invested small amounts into YC companies. Small amounts. I think the founders are generally well trained by the Y Combinator program. I definitely think they are. A lot of them come from backgrounds such as Ivy League universities, large consulting companies like Boston Consulting Group or McKinsey. And they have names behind them. So, they have probably a degree of professionalism.
Making things done.
Yes, and I think a lot of what I found is it networks. It's these guys who come in with the networks that will be successful. So the guys who come from the consulting groups, they have ins with certain companies, certain people. The Ivy League, same thing. It's baked in networks that lead to success. Now, do I think that is the best way to judge a company? Absolutely not. I look at the founders first, at the people first. When it comes to looking at programs like Y Combinator, I don't read too much into it. I should think it's a good pipeline of deals.
And basically that's it.
I just think it's a good pipeline of deals, and then I have my own evaluation process.
What is it?
No, you don't want to know that. I can't spill the beans on everyone, but I'll spill enough beans. Like the analogy, right? We spill the can of beans on the table. I'll give you a little bit. The biggest piece when it comes to actually working with companies, start companies, and evaluating them. The first impression is the last impression. If you mess up your first impression with me, it is a footprint in wet concrete. And you will never fix that. Because every time you walk by that piece of concrete, there's still a wet footprint in there. As much as you try and cover it up, in my mind, that impression cannot fully be rectified. And you'd have to do a lot to convince me to invest in your company if you mess up the first time. And now we don't have to get into all the reasons how someone could mess up, but a lot of it's interacting. How you interact with me, how you interact with other investors, and also when it comes to following up with me. If you are not persistent and you just drop off and disappear out into the air after we have an initial conversation, nah, that's a big red flag for me. Second piece of this, how you interact with me. You know what, Ashley, how about this? I will spill a secret. When it comes to actual startups that approach me, and I have a genuine interest, Now, I probably should never publicly say this, but yeah, if they watch it, sure. I tell them the first thing. I could come on it as an advisor. I could probably bring some other investors from my investor group with me. I know a lot of other investors. They typically follow me. If I do due diligence in a company, they'll follow me and invest with me because they trust my level of due diligence and my gut feeling. And typically say, let's start this off as advisory. We can bring a lot to the table. We can bring other investors. I say things like that. And I watch for their reactions and how they interact with that. It's a test. It is a test to see how they interact. When we say, I'm not going to put any cash right now, well, we can bring some other people. If they come back and they say, oh, that's great, I would love to talk about this, what would be the next steps? Or how, let's have a conversation about this. That's a green flag. But then, if they just disappear after that conversation, because some people want immediate cash from you. You'll say, ticket size is $50,000 or $100,000. But I say, what the hell? No, they're trying to pull money out of me in the first meeting. No. But it's how they interact with me after that. Typically, I'll give them an introduction to an accelerator or angel investing group after that. And it's how they interact with the people I introduce them to. If you make me look bad, then you are done. You are done if you make me look bad. In fact, this happened a fair bit. I will introduce people to angel investing groups or other potential people who are more experienced than me in some fields. So like with health tech, biotech, some other things, people who are technical practitioners, maybe other investors. If I introduce you to someone and you do not follow through on that, you'll respond, never show up to the meeting, they are done. They are done from my perspective. It is a foot in wet concrete when someone flops an introduction. And this isn't even just with startups. This is anything in business or personal relationships. If I introduce someone to someone, they never show up. Same thing. If you screw someone over, done. Trust is very limited with me. And I don't want to waste my time on people who would leave a bad mark. So that's the first piece of advice, right? I will test you in ways that people will not see immediately. Sometimes they'll think, oh, an investor's testing me when they ask for my materials. That's not the only way I'll test someone, right? And they ask sure, I'll ask a hard-hitting question about your business. That's not a test. That's just me getting information about your business. The test is when it comes to the people and how you interact with people. Because if you can't interact with me with graciousness, then how do I expect you to work with a team that you build over time to make this company successful? Chances are, you interact with one person that way, you will interact with other people that way. So I don't want to work with poison founders. I just can't. And I don't have the patience for it. Even though if you have the greatest idea in the world, if you are hard-headed, if you treat people poorly, I will not invest in you. Some people disagree with me. Some people definitely disagree with me. And what happens? They face. I'll tell you what I love, though. I'll tell you what I actually love, though. I like investing in engineers. People who are very technical and actual builders. And these are the people I give a lot of grace to when I meet them, and they're rough around the edges, or they overspeak the technical aspects. They go right over my head. Those are the people I love. Oh my God. The technical founders who are just very technical and, they're an inch wide, a mile deep. Those are the people I love working with because they will talk your ears off, and they are the most legitimate people. That's the story of my portfolio companies, that's maybe my investment philosophy now, right? Perfect example. MPP Labs, MPP Insights, here in Armenia. I would not have agreed to invest or do a joint venture unless they were good people at the end of the day and they were builders. So it's a legitimate company. It is a legitimate company past the startup stage. And, it's not a startup, different type of investment, different level of investment, right? This is between a startup and maybe a boring business, a legitimate business.
Okay.
It's a legitimate business opening a new office. Maybe it's a hybrid.
Could be.
It's a startup in the US, maybe, if you open up a new office, but it's an established company with endless resources from the other international branches and engineering teams.
You tell me. Is it actually a hybrid? Or can you call it like a startup? If you had like a huge team in one country, then just jump on another country, say, hey, I'm a startup, I need an investment.
No, you can't do that. No. You absolutely cannot do that. What you can do is you go to a new market
Okay.
and treat it like a lean startup.
I see.
So you start with a couple of people. For example, I'm helping the MPP Insights team right now, and I'm essentially leading a team of 7 people to launch the company in the US with new branding, business development foundations, everything when it comes to marketing, and also the technical delivery. So a lot of these, I'm leading a lean team of 7 people to execute. And I typically don't get involved with portfolio companies like that. I just don't. I never had time historically, which is why when it came to, this whole party of Sergey coming to convince me to get involved, I was kind of ecstatic about it because this is my domain. And I like kind of this startup feel. And I had agreed to do it for, maybe 6 to 12 months, to get involved with it for 6 to 12 months on more than just an investor level or a board member level. So, it's definitely a hybrid in a lot of cases. They provide great data engineering and business intelligence services. And I believe in the technical skills of the team. That's the thing. When it comes to, working with the builders and investing in the builders, I know that they are technically great in what they do, and even they are sometimes better than I am at it. I mean, God forbid I work half a decade at a company doing something, and then I go meet, a few Armenians, and they're far better than me at it, and they can deliver faster. Only God knows what would happen there. So those are the companies I'd want. People who are better than me. People who are smarter than me. And also we can kind of connect different skill sets that I have on taking them into the US market and also their technical skills, because knowing that they can deliver for clients already. I mean, they have hundreds of clients around the globe right now, but not a US market. They are not in the US market yet. So I know it can deliver for clients around the globe. They can also deliver for the US market with some tweaks and changes. Most companies that I interact with are all marketing. They are all business people, and they all just love a good brand. These guys are nowhere near that. You know what they did for 15 years? They had a logo of an octopus. A cartoon octopus with their logo for enterprise B2B sales. They had an octopus. I was shocked. And then I learned that there are other companies that don't even have a website and they $10, $20 million a year. They don't even have LinkedIn marketing. None of that. It warped my complete view when I saw all of this. They're word of mouth businesses. It's like you go to a restaurant that is a hidden gem hole in the wall. Same type of thing. You just found a company that's a hidden gem hole in the wall that does great data engineering services. I mean, that's the exact analogy. You just found something that's relatively undiscovered, and it doesn't need marketing. because they have word of mouth. I mean, I don't like relying on Google reviews for restaurants because I know most of them are fabricated marketing bullshit. I want to go ask a local, where do I eat? What is undiscovered? Where do you get your normal lunch? Because I know those places are going to be great. Same thing in software, data engineering services, anywhere. So it totally warped my mind when I realized that they use an octopus as their logo. Now, nothing's wrong with the octopus. One of their other portfolio companies, because they have about 5 companies total underneath the MCT Labs umbrella. Another one with a lizard. It was a funky looking lizard, and I can show you the photo, but it was funky. And I love the quirkiness of it. I love the quirkiness personally because I know quirky businesses that look cartoonish are actually probably the most intimidating businesses out there.
Whoa.
Think about it, right? If you choose to put a cartoon octopus or a lizard as your logo, you must have some real kahunas to show that. And they do. So, it's kind of like, I show up, I'm a nice guy, I'm not intimidating, but then we actually show up with the technical skills. That's why I love it. Unfortunately, I told Sergey that we have to put the zoo animals back in the zoo from the American market, which is a whole other conversation. Let me clarify this. There's a difference between rough around the edges and just being an asshole. There's a difference between all the edges and being an asshole. Right? There are guys, right? The founders who, will screw up introduction, they're assholes. Whereas the guys who are rough around the edges, they mean well. They're nice guys. These are the guys who, would invite me to their house for Armenian Korovats and, introduce me to their families. And they're genuinely great guys. Those are the guys that are the builders. They're genuinely nice people. They're just very technical. And they're not used to talking to business people as much. They're used to just building stuff.
Yeah, and they always lack of business development most of the time.
Oh, God, yeah. And that's why we connect them into these systems.
You made some parallels between business development and kitchen. Many times.
That's true.
I would love to, if you could quickly break it down that formula for us. I do understand what you mean, but I would love to hear your explanation how business development aligns with the kitchen culture.
So I can stretch this analogy for hours probably, but the easiest way to explain it is I believe strongly that companies should be ran like a kitchen. And let me explain. When it comes to actual companies, everybody needs to have roles in the company. You can't just have 10 generalists doing everything because they'll butt heads and it's just not effective. You need to, and in the kitchen, everybody has a defined role in the back of a restaurant kitchen. It's the operation level, right? The operation. So, you have the chef de partie, you have the saucier, which makes the sauce, you have the sous chef, you have maybe the chef de cuisine, which is the head kahuna who's calling the shots and defining the recipes, and you want to make sure everybody's in line. I don't want my sous chef, when I'm not there, to be changing my recipe like an idiot and stick to what we do best. I don't want them to go change the recipe. I don't want them to screw it up. Same thing in business, right? Everybody needs to have a role and to stick to their roles. And they need to do their roles really well to make it a well-oiled machine. That's part of what I believe. And I also believe that the functions of the kitchen have parallels to business. For example, mise en place. Mise en place stands for everything is prepared, everything in preparation. So when you're about to cook a stew, you have all of the ingredients cut up, whether the onions are chopped the cabbages, the meat, everything is prepared to be cooked. Cooked to order. And then once you're ready to cook it, everything goes in the pan. That stands for the systems and processes in a business. Everything needs to be prepared, need to be documented and ready when we are ready to execute. Cycle. The kitchen has ingredients, and you need to use the best ingredients when you cook. That can also have a parallel to the people. You need to have the best people on your team. Because if you have the best chefs in the world, you also cook the worst dish because the ingredients were bad. Then, if you have bad ingredients, you're gonna have a bad outcome regardless if you have great chefs.
Yeah.
The other piece to this is not just that, but there's other things. Another parallel, actually. In the kitchen, you have the operational side, and then you have the front of house, which is the wait staff, the maitre d', the people that interact with the customers. And a lot of the times, between the kitchen and the front of house, there is the pass. The pass is where the food is exchanged between the kitchen and the front of house. Things need to get through the pass. That is the quality control. This is refining the outputs that we deliver to the customers. So, at the pass, the plating needs to be perfect when we deliver it to the customers. Same thing in business. In cooking, you want to deliver a beautiful, tasteful dish because people eat with their eyes first. And that correlation is marketing and branding. We just talked about this. Sometimes, maybe they will not have the best plating. Someone like FTP Insights may not have the best plating, but they sure as hell have the best tasting food. Again, hidden gems don't need to be Michelin star restaurants. In this case, it's the same thing, right? It's quality control. It's making sure what we deliver to the customer is on par with what we expect and blowing their expectations away. So, you want a good kitchen analogy, that might be it. And of course, I need to refine it over time because you know me, I love food.
Yeah,
I love food. That's why I come to Armenia to eat. That's why every time I see you, we eat. If we go get steaks, we go get Armenian food. We'll just eat.
And that's one of the hidden gems of the cool cases, right?
Yes, food. Exactly. And I think when it comes to this whole analogy, right, we just need to kind of think, how can we deliver something as a team? If there's one takeaway, how can we deliver something as a team in pure hearty? If you ever go to a Michelin star restaurant and get a chance to go behind a kitchen, it's like an orchestra. It's an opera. Everybody is playing in harmony. And this is what I believe that great companies do. Of course, you always have conflicts, problems, things to resolve. But that's what they do. That's what they do in the kitchen. And a lot of it is that they do well is due to preparation, and great teamwork and communication. Because again, communication in the kitchen, it's not shouting and yelling at each other. It's simply, get the ragu, send the ragu, fire it. And then you say, hurt, and then you do it. That's what they say in the kitchen. Same thing in business. It's just simple business communication. So I hope you like that analogy. I hope that makes sense for you.
I was thinking a lot about it, and I come up with another layer of all of it.
Tell me.
Yeah, if the kitchen represents the business development, then the hostess and overall hospitality is how you market your product. Because you're making people feel seen. Hospitality, the whole idea of hospitality is make people feel seen, welcome, and part of something. And the food, service, design, all that ingredients in a recipe or for human connection. Basically, the kitchen, business development is building tool for human connection. And if we pursued hospitality, we can create an experience that people will remember forever. And that's the hard part of the marketing, to market your product in a way that it will feel not strange.
I somewhat like it. There's a few things I would tweak here. Okay. There's a few things I would tweak here. I think the most important part is harmony between the front and back of house.
Yes.
Because if you have all marketing with no great food, then you're gonna walk away saying, "Well, I just went to this beautiful restaurant, but the food sucked."
It must be, the harmony must be there, the connection must be there. Otherwise, you will end up just another failed startup with a great presentation.
Oh, God. No, you're right. I think that's right. I think that a lot of times, well, first, there's a big disconnect a lot of times. And you also want to make your customers, you want them to feel like they're experiencing something.
Oh, yes.
The whole eating experience should, initial and startation, it should be life-changing. Life-changing. For your audience. I don't know, I think about this. I'm thinking about this a little bit more now. Some of the best dining experience that I had, and at least this is just my philosophy, have been at boutique places. Yeah. Maybe something like Thomas Keller's The French Laundry, which is world renowned and has been for over 30 years. And the guy is probably a guy in some capacity when it comes to nurturing people with great food. But generally, and I think you know this, I like quick places that they're scrappy.
Yeah.
But they deliver great food.
Yeah, my last question for you will be, I know we already covered a lot of topics, and during our conversation, you gave us a lot of good advices, how to deal with financial autonomy, how to do your pitch decks, your investments, how to treat yourself, how to treat your business. But what will be that one foundational advice or thing that every person, every entrepreneur, or every person who wants to start this entrepreneurial journey must do or know?
When it comes to financial autonomy, well, a whole different story there. One piece of advice that I would give any entrepreneur that's aspiring to be an entrepreneur, it should be yourself and get yourself out there. That's probably two pieces of advice. Be yourself and go experience it. Go experience the world and get yourself out there. If someone wants to be an entrepreneur, they should have a spark of curiosity in their brain. You should be curious about people, about ideas, and you should go explore that. And you also have to be yourself when you do it. You can't just build a facade. People can read through these BS facades. It's like people put on a mask. I can see through these masks. Come on. It's like I see sometimes people that are like very calculated and soft-spoken. But it's a damn script. I want someone to be themselves and interact with people genuinely to build relationships. The most success that I've ever had has been through relationships. Building great relationships, making friends, and then doing business with those friends is how you're successful. And maybe we need another conversation about community, because community is exactly where it's at. Build a damn community. Build a community, but you have to be yourself and you have to be curious. And then you go meet people and then you connect people to each other. And then you have a baked-in community. And that's exactly what I do. I make a lot of great friends, build a lot of relationships, and then I connect them to each other. We connect dots. So if you are a startup founder looking to go do something great in the world, Go make friends. Be yourself. Talk about what you're excited about, and then connect dots between people. Get yourself out there and just build a community. Because if you have a community of people with complementary skill sets, diverse experiences and backgrounds, you can lean on them for some pieces of expertise, and for others, they can lean on you. So to any founder out there, build a community, but authentically.
I marked it.
You're taking that down. You're taking notes here.
Well, thank you so much for coming here, Pete. It was an absolute pleasure to have you. And then I personally learned a lot here. Again, there was some repeated sessions that you already shared your wisdom with me during finding and whining and dining, but that was an absolute pleasure, and there are a lot of important things that we just talk about it here. Thank you for being here today. It was an absolute pleasure to that.
I'm thrilled to be here and share some insights with your audience, and hopefully hopefully not knock them over the head with a brick by repeating myself a few times here. But I'm thrilled to be here, and I hope we'll do this again soon.
Absolutely.
Because there's much more to share.
Oh, always.
And I mean, we don't have the time for it today, but we certainly will soon, probably.
Let's see.
Maybe we are going to make a course.